Okay, so now we're starting, and this is going to be episode one for either Sundered Ages Talks or the Sage Talks or Sages Talks or something. There's no good name for it yet.
We'll figure it out.
Yeah, we'll figure it out. Uh, so myself, uh, I'm Derek. We're DM Derek. You can see there on the screen the normal thing that we have for the game setup. Uh, the camera thing is a little weird. We're using Discord, and we're getting some strange vertical tearing, and I'm not entirely sure why, but we really don't want to go back to Skype.
Right.
And then that's Stefan. He's one of the regular players in the game and a good friend
Yeah,
of
I
mine.
am. Yay.
Okay, so we do our streams on Sunday, usually when we're not having Twitch issues.
Yeah, we try to.
Yeah, but because we're not playing just the D&D campaign, we're playing in a whole new system that is mostly my creation, with some assistance from people like Stefan. We want to start having these talks to outline the things that we think were that we found wanting in most D20 systems that exist now, and so why they've been changed for Sundered Ages, and why we think the changes are superior. The setup for this may also change in the future, but right now we're set up. We'll do probably 2 episodes a week, and episode 1 and 2 will be talking about the same things. But today we'll be talking about a topic that's in the normal D20 systems, and then sort of the counterpoints for episode 2, whatever that topic may be. And for this first week, we're going to get right at the heart of the difference between most D20 systems and Sundered Ages, which is talking about character classes.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
man.
Yeah, so whether you're playing, old school D&D like first or second edition, whether you stuck with 3.0, 3.5, Pathfinder, whether you're one of those like 7 people that still plays 4th edition,
Oh, God.
or the massive group of people that have moved over to 5th edition, which seems to be popular now, or even played in a system, any D20 system that wasn't basically GURPS.
Right.
You're locked into a class system, and I say locked because I use class system almost as a pejorative at this point, but
Yeah.
from a personal view. So we're just going to go over ideas today. What do we not like about the class system? Obviously, I don't hate it fully. I think that I've been playing D&D since I was like 12. Jesus, it's been like 19 years. And most of that was with class systems, and I had a lot of fun, but we always, were doing little tweaks here and there, and, 4 or 5 years ago when I started on this project, I realized that the classes is kind of where it had to start, because that was the first place that we always homebrewed things.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so we've got a couple points we want to go over. One is that you immediately, with a class, regardless of what class you're going to play, whether it's bard or wizard or fighter, ranger, or if you're playing D20 Future or something, intelligence hero, charisma hero, whatever it is, you are taking on like this full loaded archetypal thing, and with all the pros and cons, and almost no character that you're ever going to make is going to benefit from all those pros, but you are probably going to suffer from all the cons.
Yeah. And I would even say, so going a step back, I think part of the class system itself, the benefit is so people can play into the archetypes, right? Any person who watches any fantasy game, I want to be, well, no one says I want to be a paladin, but I want to be the rogue type, or I want to be this. So they think of all those benefits, like I want to be able to do sneak attacks or stealth things, so I have to be a rogue. Like that's the person. I can't be a fighter and be sneaky. That's not 100% true because of skill checks, but I think part of the point of the classless system, or the class system, that the immediate this are the things that you're going to use, or these are the things that you're going to lose from, is you have to choose the class system that has that one thing, and it comes with all of the negatives that come with it, and that one thing that you wanted to do, right? So just a hard point on that is, if I wanted to be a sneaky cleric, that's just not a thing with classes. Not without suffering even more penalties to being a cleric, which sucks.
And like I was saying, you're almost never going to benefit from all the things that the class can do, despite the fact that the classes, people don't normally look at it this way, but like when Wizards of the Coast did classes, they more or less attempted to balance them out with a point-buy system, where everything from the health to base attack bonus to how many good saves would they get, what class abilities would they get, to try and make them equal. It never really worked. Cleric and Wizard and Bard always ended up being like on the upper end, just because no matter how awesome a fighter is, with almost no equipment on them, a Wizard at level 18 can just put like an Orb of Death down on you, or release a Howl of the Banshee, or a Cleric can just open a portal to one of the outer planes with some, reagents or something on hand. The fighter is like, well, he's really good at fighting, and that's it. Like, you could put a magical sword in his hand, and maybe he could carve through an army of demons, but he's reliant on that equipment, and will never have all the cool bells and whistles that a wizard would. But even the fighter, who I think always got the short end of the stick, and Pathfinder did good things that it sounds like 5th edition has attempted to improve on. They tried to give them more and more stuff without making them overpowered. But like, if you're a fighter in 3rd edition forward, you automatically got light armor, medium armor, heavy armor, and shield proficiencies. You usually get simple, martial, maybe one specialized weapon proficiency. Like, you get all these things. Unless you're playing some kind of like super arms master character, and even then, you're not ever going to use all these on one character. Like, if you decide to play, you're going to play like the duelist kind of warrior, where your dexterity is going to be high. Maybe you want to have, some charisma or wisdom. You've got, awareness. Maybe you're a tactician sort. But because of the restrictions in the class system, where like certain feats could only be taken by certain classes, or certain abilities were only open to certain classes, you thought the fighter is going to do this better than playing like a rogue or a ranger or whatnot. You're never going to benefit from more than one of those armor proficiencies at a time. So it encourages you to like, okay, you've got all these options, but at the same time, you kind of have to plan at level 3 what you want to be at level 15 and stick to it, and your class doesn't really have an opportunity to go outside of that trajectory. So, at level 3, you basically may have written off 2 or 3 class benefits that you will never go back to. You've essentially bought them, but you'll never use them.
Yeah. And I feel like, so short-sighted, the class system, it works really well, I think, at low levels. And you were just sort of making this point, as the long-term investment with a class system, as you go farther and farther into the levels, you're a 10th level fighter or a 10th level barbarian, you slowly realize that if you're not going directly in the direction that you wanted to go, you almost have to re-roll, because there's all these wasted things if you're not, and I hate to say it, if you're not min-maxing a lot of the times with certain classes, you're going to be almost useless. Now, obviously, that's up to the game and the GM or the DM and things like that, but still, you sort of get my point where, you can still be really shitty at stuff. But I think where class systems can shine, to be devil's advocate, of course, there was a time so long ago when D&D was new, and there's a lot of people, especially now, I think in the last 5 years, who are picking it up, and I think there is benefit for a class system for new players, right? If you're doing a lot of one-offs, and you have brand new players who just want to play the game, I think it's really easy when we go back to talking about archetypes. People immediately know like what their role is, and obviously you can do this with a classless system, but I think it's more recognizable for people in a class system where if I'm a fifth level fighter or a fifth level wizard, one, anybody who's played Dungeons and Dragons before has sort of an immediate understanding of how powerful that character is. Where in a class-based system with just points and GURPS, you don't really know exactly because there's things here and there's things there. There's no effective power level. Am I really good at this level encounter? I don't know. I'd have to actually do it. But in a class system, you kind of know, like everything's very set in stone, and of course there's restrictions that come with it. But I think there's immediate benefit for the new players because they know where they lie. They know exactly what they can and can't do. Again, the restrictions are sort of the restrictions can be okay if you're brand new because you're not going to be trying to do every single thing. You're still learning. Also, I think it helps people. I think it helps new players role play into the role better. If I could make my own classless character when I first played, I think knowing I was playing a rogue and choosing an archetype helped me roleplay into that role. So I can see why sometimes in certain circumstances at lower levels with new players, they definitely can be a benefit. But of course, I guess to the point is where can a classless system still fill in those gaps? Where can a classless system come in and say, we can still fill these archetypes through templates or whatever it is, but how easy is that to do, I guess, especially with a system nobody's heard of yet. So that's me playing devil's advocate for a class system in a sense.
Okay. Well, no, though you do have some good points. But what I would introduce then is, a class system can make it easy for someone that is brand new to step in, because there's a myriad of other things in D&D that, you or I might look at and go, oh, okay, I know what all these numbers mean. I know what I need to roll, and what the number that I'm adding to it is going to be when the DM asks me, like, oh, hey, I need an acrobatics check, or I need a strength check for this, or what's your base attack bonus, what's your will save.
Right.
But immediately what that gets tied into also is, especially for new players, they have this idea, that they're gonna play one of these archetypal classes, and so they want to play the fighter, and a guy gets in his head, he's like, okay, I'm gonna be a fighter, and I'm gonna be like a sort of an Aragorn or a Boromir, like Lord of the Rings, like Paragon character. I'm gonna be a warrior that can move men to action, and you pick a fighter, and people go, okay, here's your class, here's the feats, all this sort of stuff, and then you get into the first sort of situation where, as a fighter, you're like, okay, we have to rally this town, so I give a speech, and you say something, and the DM goes, okay, we'll roll your diplomacy check or your speech check or persuasion or whatever it is you're using. And then the person looks down at their sheet and they goes, like, I don't even have that skill because I'm a fighter. And just about every system out there that has class archetypes has decided, like, well, the fighter doesn't need diplomacy, right? It doesn't get it. 3rd edition, 3.5 Pathfinder, 4th edition, you're looking at, like, oh, they get climb and jump and swim and ride, and maybe a couple other things, maybe perception, though I'm not sure on that. But, like, they don't get any of these social skills, so you couldn't be like, oh, I want to make a fighter, I'll be a swashbuckler type, I'll be a dexterity fighter and be sort of like a Captain Jack Sparrow, and it's like, no, you can't take those skills, for the various thieving things that he does, unless you're willing to take some sort of huge hit on it. In 3rd edition, 3.5 Pathfinder, it was cross-class skills, and so you had to spend like 2 skill points for every skill you got. You were capped at a lower number, In 4th edition, it was like class skills, and your class had like 8 things. Well, depending on what class you were. If you were a fighter, I think you had like 4 things that you could choose from, and you had to pick 2. And only in those things did you get any sort of real bonus. And you could take feats later on, like to add 1 more skill. But for every feat you have to take for something like that, that's some other thing that you're denying your character to make this investment, just so like all I wanted was my fighter to be able to make speech checks. So I had to give up getting, improved critical or some bonus to my charge or whatever it is, something that mechanically, like my character, what he does 90% of the time has to be held off so I can get a feat so that I can then take the limited skill points I have and invest those into a thing to eventually be good at it. And it just it starts to break down, at least for me, in that, you even have some classes, like if you're a rogue or a bard, that sometimes just have like skills, willy-nilly, but there's certain skill things that they just can't invest in all the way. They're the old term cross-class skills, and so you have bards and rogues and whatnot that are just deciding like, okay, I'm gonna invest in these knowledge skills that if you have a good DM, may be relevant, but in most hack and slash, sit down games of D&D that you're gonna play might never come up, right? Like, whereas what you wanted to invest in, you're like, I'm a rogue and I just want to invest in ride, and it's like, well, it's a cross-class skill. You get a feat every 3 levels. Are you going to really spend one of your like 6 or 7 feats between level 1 and 20 on the ability to add that as a class skill? And most people wouldn't. They don't want to take, like I said, 6 or 7 feats, 12, 15% of all the feats your character's going to get before epic levels, and most games don't go that far, just to do like one extra thing, So again, you get locked into a thing, and to go back, not just skills, but I always think of like, there are popular wizard spells, right, that you see in most games of D&D, and then there's like the 70% of spells that never get used. Why do you need access to all those spells? Why not decide what your character is going to specialize in? Most people that are playing a wizard sort of decide early on, like, oh, I've got this cool idea. My wizard is going to be a guy that like is really into fire, like he's a pyromaniac, and so he's going to take the feat to add extra fire damage or to add another DC. But your class is wizard, and so you're not just like a pyromaniac. You're not just specializing in fire or the elements. You're getting all the conjure creatures, you're getting all the identifies, you're getting all the alteration spells and all those things that you may look through the book at some point and go, hey, like, do I know this, in some sort of odd situation. But most of the time you're never going to look at anyways. You're going to have your list of, I know, 2 spells or 3 spells each level, and they are all aligned with how I view my character, and the rest of the spells may as well not exist.
Yeah, and I think to sort of end on the point of just how poorly class systems can restrict people, I think they tried to implement, and most people will be familiar with this, a way to almost help. And you brought it up momentarily about the cross-classing. So, I could be 10th level barbarian and 5th level, 5 levels in rogue, which is a common thing that people would do.
Cross-class with skills, multi-classing. And
multi-classing,
classes, yeah.
So yeah, that's what I'm bringing up is to bridge the gap between people who wanted to do multiple things, is they had multi-classing, and then they also brought up prestige classes. And I remember I was super excited. The first one I did was Exemplar. I think you remember that. That was the first game we played. And I loved it, but obviously it still had its... At a certain point, how many prestige classes do you have to add to people just put down literally an entire book and say, why don't we just go to a classless system at this point? Like, there's so many things that you can be. We should just separate this into things and people pick categories rather than having 400, prestige classes. But I think that's a point to end on where, obviously they've almost admitted to the restrictions by having to continually add more every edition, more prestige classes, more opportunity to cross class and multi-class and all sorts of stuff. I think you had, I don't want to skip over one of the points that we were going to talk about, but I think there was a good transition point into feats. I know you wanted to talk about health and or skills. Well, we just talked about skills being directly related to class, but health and AC being tied to class. I know you wanted to talk about that. So I think that one. So I guess a quick story, and this is like a small thing, but this always used to drive me nuts. So how many times at the end of the game, end of the session, we leveled up, and so you would say to us, okay, you're level whatever. By the time next game comes around, make sure your characters are leveled, or if they're not, just show up a little bit early and we'll do it together. Not a big deal. But like most of the time, we don't want the game to go on and someone's like, oh crap, let me do all of my stuff right now. And it's like, no, come on, dude. You had literally an entire week. Yeah, like that happens so many times. But even worse, so back when multi-classing was a thing, people would do, I think the most classic one that I have knew was people would start barbarian and then put a little bit into rogue because they multi-classed so well together. But the differences in things like health and AC were literally on different spectrums. So what you'd have to do is, if you thought you calculated wrong, and God forbid you are one of the people who actually rolled for health, you'd have to go back to the book, figure out what hit dice you would get per level from one of the classes, and another hit die for the other class, and then redo your health, or figure out AC bonuses and skill bonuses tied to each class for each level. And it was just ludicrous because, as you go through the levels, you get to 12, 13, any double digit. That takes longer. If you messed up along the way, just taking 30 minutes at the start of a game to realize that you screwed up that number like 4 levels ago and trying to fix it is a nightmare.
Yeah, well, I mean, you took 4 levels in Barbarian and then you take a level in Rogue, but you're a level 1 Rogue, and so you're a level 5 character, but then it's like, okay, well, I'm limited on these new class skills that I can take as Rogue to only, the cap for them is either, in 3rd edition, would be 4, or in later editions 1, whatever it is, to match your Rogue level, or the cross-class, limit for Barbarian. But by the time you're on Barbarian 4, Rogue 5, oh god, like, I erased my health off my sheet rather than erasing, like, current health. I need to come up, what was my total health? How many skill points should I have offhand? Like,
skill points, man.
Some of that math can be done on the side.
Yeah.
It doesn't take too long, as long as you're someone that's good, just adding and subtracting quickly. Which not everybody is that plays D&D. Shocker. But
shocker.
All those D6s. No, but and then you have back in the day, adding like, okay, well, you had this many levels, so your fortitude save as a barbarian was this, but then your fortitude save as a rogue is this, and then people wondering like, okay, but do you start at the base value? Because some people did that in a system where like they'd sort of cheat, and at level 1 you'd have like a +3 in one thing. You'd have like +3 constitution or fortitude as a barbarian, and 0 in the others, or 1 in the others. And then you take one level of rogue and you get a +3 in reflex, and now your saves are actually higher than anyone else that just has a single class. And Wizards tried to balance it out with like, if you have a secondary class, and you're not a human, then it has to be a special class to not take penalties. Like if you're a dwarf, you can multi-class into fighter or ranger or something without taking penalties. But then the classes always have to be within like 1 or 2 levels of each other. Otherwise, you take like a 10% or 15% experience hit, and like nobody writes the numbers down. And nobody wants to be that guy at the table when everyone else is like, okay, you gained a level, you're all level 11, except for you, because like you have 3 levels in rogue and 4 levels in fighter, and then 4 levels in bard for this character idea you came up with. You're most of the way through level 9. Like, just stick with it. You know what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah.
I know
Yeah.
these numbers add to 11, but
Yeah.
yeah, that like keeping track of it was almost as horrendous as keeping track of the old item creation system of like build an item, spend experience, and you're like, are you keeping track of that, wizard? I don't think you
Yeah.
are. You made 17 wands last game.
Yeah, that was ridiculous.
Yeah, so yeah, prestige class and or prestige and multi-class were used. In my mind, they're a band-aid on top of a grievous wound. Like, something needed to be done, but wizards and a lot of other people, they're wedded to the class system, at least currently still in 5th edition. And so the best thing they could do was like, oh, you want to be a rogue, but you wanted to be a very specific kind of rogue. So, by the time you're level 5, if you take these feats and get these skills up, which usually were in line with what the prestige class did, some weren't. That was weird. Then you could start taking levels in the prestige class. But even then, some, I think like Exemplar, would have 10 levels. So you couldn't go like, you could qualify for it at 5th level, but then at level 15, you had Rogue 5, Exemplar 10, and then you had to start taking levels in Rogue again, or take levels in another prestige class. Like, but Exemplar is exactly what you wanted to do, or is closer to what you wanted to do. But because it's a prestige class and there's a level limit, and
it just ended. Yeah.
It just ends. And other classes only had 5. Like, I think Assassin might have had 10, but there were plenty where there's only 5 levels. There's a lot of rogue, like hunter, assassin-y, like specialized characters. Like, oh, you're a dragon hunter. There's only 5 levels for this, and then you have to go back to being a regular fighter or rogue, or you have to pick yet another prestige class to like, and hope that what you're losing out on now from not getting the slew of feats that fighters would get won't weaken you in every other situation that doesn't specifically involve like a dragon, right? You know that you've taken Dragon Slayer. Like,
yeah, and even then, so I mean, if you did end up getting into multi-classing early and you took one and then one ended and you got into the other, by the time that you're those high levels, sometimes, depending on which they were, they fell off. Like, if you're actually playing a game where people are at 15th level or higher, some of those bonuses fell off because you're such a high level that bonuses are so outrageous that the 5 levels I took didn't amount to just being a 15th level fighter. Like, those just, even if I was fighting a dragon, like, and I took dragon stuff, it really didn't help me that much. 5 levels in fighter scale better at late game because it's 16th now or whatever.
Yeah, you would say like, okay, I got a plus 3 to hit dragons and a plus 5 to damage against dragons. And maybe you got to take track for dragon creatures or whatnot. But if you had just stayed a regular fighter, you could have taken at level 5 or 6 like weapon focus, and then weapon specialization, and then greater weapon focus, and then greater weapon specialization. Then you would have had a plus 2 to hit everything, not a plus 3 to hit dragons, and you'd have had a plus 4 damage to everything, not just a plus 5 to dragons. So at the end of the day, you look and you're like, a dragon hunter is exactly what I wanted to be, but taking this prestige class got me like just slightly closer than the class, that when I looked at the class, I said, this doesn't do enough for where I want my character to go.
Yeah.
Oh man, like, I've hamstringed myself against not dragon opponents, whereas I'd have gotten most of the way where I am now without suffering any penalties if I just stuck with the bland class that I knew wasn't going to do all the things I wanted it to do.
And the bland class generally has higher base stat bonuses because you're getting specific things from the prestige, so generally they're just going to be stronger. They're going to have better hit dice, better, saves or whatever it is, just because they know you're specializing. This is obviously only, of course, if you're getting to the very high levels, but still, I think it hits back to if you didn't exactly pick what you wanted to be at those high levels, you probably screwed up.
Well, yeah,
If you
and
didn't plan ahead, it's not going to go well, which sucks. It really sucks.
And to touch on what you were just saying, and dip back into one thing I wanted to talk about: health, survivability. We use dodge and armor as two separate things. Most systems use AC or defense score, but as far as I know, I think 4th edition narrowed classes down a little bit, and then it seems like from what I saw, 5th edition widened that gap again. Your class locks you into what your health is going to be. So the biggest difference is always like, okay, the wizard will have like a D4 plus Constitution modifier, and that's their HP. And then the barbarian will have a D12 plus their Constitution modifier, and that's their HP. And it's funny. You're in game 1, and the wizard who's got he rolled a 3, which is phenomenal on a D4, and he has no Constitution bonus, and so the kobold with the small crossbow that does 1d4 damage hits him, boom, 4 damage, and he's like, oh, I'm unconscious, like I'm bleeding out, somebody needs to pick me up. And even at level 10, if he's continued to do well and gotten a 3 every single time, or maybe he's gotten some 3s, some 2s, and he's picked up a Constitution bonus, his health is like 30, 32, somewhere right in there. By that time, the fighter or the barbarian has picked up enough bonuses that if they're using like a two-handed weapon, they're looking at, okay, so my axe or my greatsword is like 2d6, plus 6 for strength, plus 4 for feats, plus 6 for a power attack, and now you're seeing that they can still pretty much one-shot, or close to one-shot, the wizard, who also doesn't have a great dodge score. Like, that, the class wasn't specific for the dodge score, but wizard as a class didn't offer you anything other than if you want to give up some of your spells to things like mage armor and arcane shield. But if not, then you still basically just remained, no matter how much you didn't want it to be that way, you remained squishy. You could pump up your Constitution, but you were never going to make it even halfway to where the barbarian would be, or even most fighters with their D10. And then outside of health, the dodge wasn't class-based per se. Like, everybody had either a base that was 10, or some systems have a leveling thing. I think 4th edition had a leveling thing where it was like 10 plus half your class level. But then the wizard still doesn't wear armor. The fighter or the barbarian's usually light or medium armor. The fighter is going to have twice or 3 times or more the health that the wizard does. And the wizard at, level 10, depending on the system, his AC is somewhere between 15 and 20 at like the really high end. He's got some rings of deflection on, and he uses a spell that stacks with that. Whereas the fighter, he's got a suit of full plate, and he's got a shield, and his armor is 24, right? So he's got 3 times the health and a higher AC, and his reflex score is his reflex save is probably the same or better than the wizard. Like, the wizard, there's no good choice for someone that wanted to cast spells to add survivability other than just directly going, instead of using fireballs, instead of casting fireballs, I'm going to be casting these spells to give myself a defense bonus in combat.
You're just hindering yourself at that point.
Yeah,
I think everybody agrees.
Yeah, and then, the guy in your group you've got the ranger that wants, like, haste or something on round 1, and it's like, no, let me give myself +4 bonus to AC. God, I hope it helps.
Of course the ranger would ask for haste. A freaking selfless bastard, always wanting more attacks.
Yeah.
Two-handed.
with wielding.
Yeah.
But so, like, you get the double whammy of, I wanted to do this thing. Like I wanted to be a character that used subtlety, that talks their way out of through events, or is a lock picking thief kind of character, or cast spells, or basically anything other than I want to be a knight or Conan. Your survivability is going to be very low, and the system was reinforcing on multiple fronts that your health is low, your one or two of your saves, reflex, fortitude, or both of them are bad, and your dodge is bad, like your defense, your AC. In a classless system, you can avoid all of those things. You say like, I want to be a wizard, but I'm willing to give up. Instead of having access to all these spells, I want to specialize and be a wizard that does like druidic stuff, or summons creatures, and that's what I do. And so I'm going to take some of that investment that in a class system is all allocated into the box called wizard, and I'm going to put a little bit of that in this thing that raises my health, or this thing that gives me the ability to wear armor, with less malice to my spell casting. The class system goes like, oh, there was a thing in one of the splat books in 3.0, and you could wear like rose crystal armor to lower the malice for wearing armor, and then they got rid of it because it completely like shattered balance for the way that they built wizards, and they never looked back.
Yeah. Yeah, if you made them survivable, why wouldn't they just be the ultimate character? I think a good question, and I'm sort of pushing us into the next topic here. And this is one thing that you and I just started talking about a few months ago when I had first played 5th edition, and it just baffled me. So 5th edition, they removed feats. As far as I can explain, they're not exactly how it was in 3.5 Pathfinder, which I think had more success. So more equivalent to when you level, you have your skill abilities. So if you remember, like in Pathfinder, barbarians got damage reduction at like every 4th level or something. And that's just something they got. So once you got to 4th level, you got DR1. Once you got to 8th level, you got DR2, or whatever the levels were. And I think that's how they started adding feats. You just had a choice, pick one of the 4 per level for 5th edition. Don't quote me on that, but it's something like that.
I'm looking at it right now. It says you at certain levels you would get ability score improvement, or using optional rules you can forego that to take a feat, and then you still have to meet the prerequisites for that feat.
So you don't get both. But why? So why remove? Why limit it? Like why do you think they did that? I don't understand that.
I think they did it for the same reason they did most of the things in 4th edition. This would be Wizards specifically, or if someone else is making it and Wizards is publishing it now. I'm not fully aware. I'm mostly a Paizo person myself. They kept pushing the system for an almost MMO-ish level of balance, where like if you were playing, in classic World of Warcraft, people were, yelling and screaming that either, this thing that rogues had was too good, or this thing that warlocks had was too good. And, that sort of banter did exist in the D&D world. Mm-hmm. And in 4th edition, you could sort of see, like, regardless of what class you played, you use this ability, you marshal your martial abilities and do 1 weapon plus modifier damage with the chance of knocking them down. Or you're a wizard, and you call upon your arcane powers to do 1 weapon plus intelligence modifier damage with the chance of knocking them down, but you do it from 10 feet. Or you're the ranger, and you use your tactical prowess to do 1 weapon plus dexterity modifier damage with the chance to snare an enemy.
Sweet flavor text.
That's sweet flavor text that says like Falcon Strike. You strike from on high, your foes not knowing like where to put their feet, and they trip and they eat birdseed when they hit the ground. Like, whatever it was, the flavor text was always there, and they sold cards and all this. But like that's because they muddied
the
classes down. The classes down so much in an attempt to balance that they even removed most spells from spellcasting classes, that spells that really did anything that wasn't directly combat based, and put them back in as rituals that were like in a separate part of the book in the back with their own rule set. And you had to, most people that I played fourth edition with, even after 6 months or 8 months in a campaign, either still weren't aware that rituals was a thing, or if they were aware, they looked at the rule set once, and to them it was the equivalent of looking at D&D 3rd edition grappling rules, and they said, "This is not worth it. We're just gonna homebrew it, and if we want to resurrect a character rather than reading through the rituals, the DM's just gonna have to come up with an alternate way for us to do this."
Mm-hmm.
5th edition, it seems like they tried to get away from that a little bit. The homogeneity that all these classes got, but they specialize the classes, and you look at fighter and it's like, oh, now you choose a weapon style and all these other things that used to be part of certain prestige classes, like picking a weapon master or whatnot. But in this way, they've given you a path or 2 paths or 2.5 paths, but at level 3 or 4, you basically still have to know what you want your character to be like at level 16. And if you decide at level 8 that you really wish that you could pick up this other thing, it's too late to do that. Like, your character is locked in to be good at the weapon style that you chose as a fighter, and at level 15 you're going to get a second weapon style, but not all the bells and whistles that come with it, like that last favorite enemy bonus that rangers would get. And it's like, I have a +5 against orcs, I have a +1 against dragons. I probably should have done that in reverse, right?
Right. Yeah.
It just,
Yeah.
even when they specialize the classes, it feels like they're taking away the ability for you to make the character that you really want to make, unless the character you wanted to make was exactly the archetype that they have down in the books. And if it diverges from that in any way, you're sort of out of luck. And if you take this topic to the D20 community, you go to like a Reddit for D&D, the answer that people will give you is just talk to your DM about it and homebrew something, right? And it's like, well, then why use this system anyways? Like, why don't we just play everything on GURPS and just roll a d6, or what was it, big motherfucking crab truckers or whatever.
That was fun.
Like, just roll it. Pick 3 abilities. You're a super spy. You're a famous sous chef. And you're a ballerina. And just roll a d6 for everything, and the DM will just tell you how awesome you did or how terrible you did. You know, if you're gonna go with a rule set, that rule set should give you the ability to play the way you want to play, without the DM having to constantly like, oh, we'll adjust that, we'll change that. The DM's time for adjusting and changing should be in how the story is written, like how the game is written. If a character makes that speech check, and instead of going like, I attempt to bribe the guard, goes, hey, this is that guy that we saw when we entered the city, right? This is Steve. But we also know Steve knows Ted down at the bar, and we did that good thing for Ted, and that was 3 weeks ago. I'm sure Steve has heard about that by now. So when I try and get Steve to come to my side to let me through the gate on this thing, I put my 2 gold or whatever in Steve's hand, and I make my speech check, but I say, hey, Steve, we don't know each other, but we both know Ted. And I'm sure you've heard, that Ted had this problem. There was a thief breaking into his bar. And whether you heard that it was us or not, we're the ones that took care of that problem. We're willing to help. That we're good for it. I'm just asking, that you do us a favor on this. And you'll know that you're not just helping yourself, you're also helping Ted. And if a player that's willing to take the time to add flavor and reach into the story that they're taking part in for a check like that, the only modification I should be worrying about homebrewing in a D&D game is, wow, that's a great score. I'm going to add like another 3 or 4 or whatnot to this person's check behind the scenes. I shouldn't have to worry about their class doesn't have the ability to do this. let me give them let me just start like adding skills or taking away skills or adding powers to their class to balance it out for the way that we want to play.
Yeah. And I think so. To go back on a point that I had said earlier, again, to very minorly play devil's advocate again, I think part of the way the class system benefits is that the sort of it's so easy to see how strong a class could be on paper. So when you have the class system and you have this is what this level character does and this is what this level character does. It's written out very clearly. This is everything you can do. And the restrictions make it easy because you can see exactly what you can do and exactly what you can't do. So you can compare, a fifth level whatever to a fifth level wizard and you see, well, this is exactly what I'm getting for this one and that one, and this is what I want to go for. So it's much easier to see on paper, I think, at least at first, where the strength lies with characters and those archetypes in a class system, and it's much harder in a classless system. Again, depending on how the system works, I won't go too far into it because this is something we'll talk about on Thursday, but if I don't have that class system and I'm putting points into a thing, and at 3 levels I could have put this many points into this thing or that thing, sure, I can run the numbers and see how much damage I do, but there's no immediate qualification for what I'm great at, right? I know I put most of my points into this, the equivalent of diplomacy. I should be pretty good at it. I put most of my points towards it. So I know I'll be pretty good at that. But how do I compare to someone who was a cleric? I know I'm playing some form of charismatic sort of battle mage who wants to dabble in healing. I'm not going to call myself a cleric. I'm not going to call myself a paladin. I've put my points into what would look like a template, but where do I really fall at what could be 3 levels in or whatever the equivalent is. So I can see where it can be confusing at first, at least, because you can't make those immediate connections to am I putting too much in one thing and sort of, pointing myself too narrow and I'm really strong at this one thing but I'm not good at enough stuff, or am I spreading out and I'm jack of all trades and master of none? It's hard to see that, I think, immediately when at least to a new system. I do think, obviously, again, we'll talk about this on Thursday, but templates certainly would help. I mean, that's the first argument towards it is it's very easy to write templates, but still, when a new system comes out, how do you know how if you're doing it right? Because we keep saying how if you don't plan ahead, you're gonna screw yourself over, and you might as well just re-roll. If your DM's good, they'll let you re-roll. Generally, that's not a big deal, especially if you're really just useless. But how do you know that you're doing that? Especially if everybody's new to the system, how do you know that's what people should be doing? These are the numbers that you should be hitting, because it's easy to see in a class system because everybody's about the same. Especially in 4th edition, everybody's doing exactly the same thing, so you know where they are. But in the classless system, how do you rank that, or how do you see that?
Well, I would say first in the class system, yeah, you can. It's easier to immediately see now. 5th and 4th edition made it even easier to see than some of the earlier editions because you could be a rogue in Pathfinder even and go like, okay, I'm gonna be a level 6 character. What can a rogue give me? But there still wasn't an immediate, here's all the things you can do with skills, because you still had to decide where those skills were going to be allocated, right? So you could have a level 6 rogue that didn't do, didn't have any ability in like lock picking. Or you could compare, it's still not easy if you're not playing a fighter or a ranger or a barbarian to go, we're all making characters for a one-off or 2 games or whatever, and I've never played a wizard, and we're gonna be level 10, and I'm gonna be a wizard, and you think, like, that's cool, what does a wizard have? Okay, here's the bonus feats, and here's the level of spells I'll get, and then you go like, shit, like, I have to figure out, here's the list of spells for being a wizard, and I've got 1 level 5 spell, and then I've got 2 level 4 spells, and then 3 level 3 spells, and if we're talking about like being able to immediately know to compare one thing to the other, you've already lost it at that point. Like
Mm-hmm.
if you're, especially if you're new, you look and you go level 5 spells, and you see like chain lightning, and you're like, that's the coolest shit ever. I'm just gonna take that. You
Yeah.
know,
You can only cast it
yeah,
like 3 times.
yeah. You cast it once or twice. Whereas like maybe what you should have taken is just some completely other spell. But there were so many options available within that level 5 spell thing that it isn't immediately apparent like which one is best.
Mm-hmm.
And even people that have been playing for a while, if they make a character that's not low level for a short game one off or whatnot, it can still be a pain to go like, oh Christ, like I picked to play the cleric and now I have to set up my spell book with the
Mm-hmm.
number of how many spells do I have per day, per level, how many of these am I casting. I need to go in and pick my domains, and those domains need to balance with what the party's going to be doing. But the rogue, the guy that playing the rogue said that he's not going to do this, so maybe I should take this domain, and what looked like an easy point A point B comparing apples to apples breaks down really quickly if you're not just fighter barbarian maybe
Mm-hmm.
rogue into like, oh man, what thing do I want to grab from the pile here? They're all available, right? All these spells are available, but you're limited on which ones you can pick from. And then again, if you're new, you go, I have X amount of these per day. What can I use a higher level one in place of a lower level one? This spell, at level 5 does
Mm-hmm.
this. My level 4 one does does this. Why can if I have the power to cast this level 5 spell that's amazing, how come I can only cast the significantly weaker version of it twice, but I can cast the really powerful one time? Like, how does this make sense for my character? And at that point you've already like meted your way out of enjoying the power fantasy.
Yeah, yeah, and part of my problem with spells per day was always, and I think a lot of people can relate to this. So like anytime you get potions or like a really strong thing in any game, right? You're like, there's one of two things. You're either gonna blow your load all at the start. You're gonna like, I got this thing, I'm gonna use it, or you've only usually had that because you're the guy who's like, I'm gonna save this for the time that I really really need it, and either never comes or you just die, and you're like, well,
Yeah.
fuck.
You're like
So
you're either the guy that you get stabbed like once. You're the wizard and you get hit by that stray arrow. You've got 13 health. You've taken 3 damage. You're like, that orc just hit the fighter for 8 damage. Look, I'm gonna drink the potion right now.
yeah, I need to stay. Yeah, I need to stay topped up. Or
Or
you wait until the last minute, and it's like you risk dying in the first place. Yeah, yeah.
or you
The
just never use it. Like you're playing most
yeah.
RPG
Oh yeah,
games. You get to the last boss and you go, ah, shit, I have 72 elixirs. Like
yeah.
I never use
I
these
have
things.
the Gauss cannon with full ammo, and I've been trying to pick up more ammo, but I never actually used it. Yeah.
Yeah. So really, I mean, when it comes down to it, and I'm sure we'll talk a great deal about parts of the class system later on, Thursday, episode 2 Thursday and beyond. But my problem with it, like to sum everything up on that, it's just it. I loved it when I started playing. I modified it piece by piece, like as I got more comfortable with D&D. And by the time 4 or 5 years ago, I said like, I'm starting to not like this, and the fact that I want each of my characters to feel specifically like the character that I had in mind when I was like, I'm gonna play D&D. I'm gonna make this character. Here's what he's gonna be good at. Here are the things he's not gonna be good at. And I don't want to be weighed down by all the other things. It's like, oh, he can also do this, and it's like, I don't care. Like, I don't want her to be good at that. The cleric already does that. The rogue already does that. Like, I would rather be better at these things. And
Hmm.
so, a class system has done the weighing of the scales for you in advance. And so
Yeah.
I would rather take the customization where myself or someone playing in a classless system can get I think more easily, even more invested in their character when they go like, I made this character. I didn't just say, I'm a level 3 fighter, and I picked the bow weapon style, and my name is Flavorhawk. And hopefully I'll become attached to Flavorhawk. No, I'm going to play in this classless system, and I'm going to go, my character identifies as a fighter. He's from a tribe, a plains tribe. Archery is his number one thing. But a big part of this character's background, this culture, is also that they ride horses their whole life, sort of a steppe culture kind of thing. So it's not just going to be that. Now I'm going to specialize in more physical activities to do with the background that I've come up with for this culture. Or I might say he's going to be this amazing archer, but that was just sort of the culture that he came from and what was expected of him. The thing that he really enjoys doing is making potions and poisons, and he's a natural scientist and is always trying to figure out cataloging flora and fauna and these things. And you're like, oh, you played a rogue, or most rangers, the ability to make potions and poisons was pretty much beyond you. Wizard never actually put a good system in for poison creation. You always had to have Poison Craft, the Splat book. But I want to make the character I want to play, and because it's my character, and at level 1 it's different than all the other level 1 characters, and at level 10 it's grossly different from all the other level 10 characters, I can immediately be more invested in it and stay more invested in it.
And I think when it gets to the point where people get more into that, it's fun to share those. You get to see other people's things that they've made and be like, holy shit, that's unique. I never thought of something like that. I think I agree. I think the class system is attractive to new players because it's easy to see where everything fits, and people like that when they're new to things. I like to see the archetypes. I like playing as the knight, I like playing as the paladin, I like playing as the rogue, and I can just pick, I can do the thing, and I feel immediately immersed into the game. But I think anybody who plays more than one game of D&D, actually even into their first game, they're probably already thinking of how they can do different stuff, and not just how they can do it as a person, but how they can move their character in a direction. And I think a lot of people, at least with myself, certainly, I found the limitations of my character, and it made me change who I wanted to be, which sucks when you're new, because you're like, oh well, you can't do that exactly. You can do something like this, and you're like, well, that's okay. I guess I'll do that, and you're willing to do it because you're new, and you're like, this is fun. But to have that hindrance on new players is tragic, honestly. So I do think it's attractive at first, but I think anybody who plays more than one game, and anything I've ever seen online, everybody favors the classless system. When it can be done right, it's just better. It's just flat out better. The freedom is great.
We don't want people feeling like they're constantly having to settle for the silver medal on the character that they want to have. They should have the gold medal in being who it is that they want to be as a character, based on, here's the amount of skills you have. Here's what your character can be. Go wild. Go, make exactly who you want to be. And if you don't like it, then you can change it. And especially your next character can be a totally different character, even if they share some of those skill sets or abilities from the last one, because you're not hard locked into all of these traits go together. You can just pick and choose in a classless system and go, here's the things I want to be good at. And I don't have to be the every rogue or the every fighter.
Yeah, I agree. I'm really excited to talk about the points for our classless system.
Yeah. All right, well, that's just shy of an hour, which was a little bit longer than we had initially planned on.
Teeny bit.
Yeah, but we knew we were probably going to go over. But so that's where we'll stop for today. And then I'll get this uploaded to the YouTube channel, which is linked on the Twitch page. And then ideally we'll be back Thursday for part 2, where we'll talk about the benefits of the classless system, specifically some of the benefits for the Sundered Ages system without getting into the mechanics exactly of how it works.
Yeah.
But just I think that we'll be able to do a good job of explaining
Well, certainly.
explaining why we think it's superior.
I agree.
All right, then we're gonna go ahead and sign off here, and again, we'll be back Thursday.
See you guys next time.
Later.